Hello everypony, welcome to Inside Critical's Cranium, where we discuss aspects of the show, its characters, and the fandom as a whole. Throughout my reviews, you may have seen me talk about episodes being in my top 10 favorite episodes of all time list, but I've never actually shared it with you. Until today. Now that Friendship is Magic is in the books, and we still have until September 2021 to wait for G5, I'm here to give my definitive top 10 list of my favorite episodes of Friendship is Magic. Obviously, since I haven't gotten to reviewing every episode of the show yet, there will be some spoilers here for those future reviews. So if you don't want to have some of my future reviews spoiled for you, I suggest you wait to watch this ICC until my review series is finished. Consider this your spoiler warning. Everyone on board? Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Number 10. Friendship is Magic. How can any Brony deny that this episode changed their life? I know it changed mine. In retrospective, it didn't have the best plot in the show's history, and things would only get better from there. But the series pilot did something magical that I don't think any other episode has been entirely able to replicate. It subverted our expectations. For many of us, we were urged to watch the show through a friend's recommendation, and we all rolled our eyes in disgust at the sheer absurdity that we, grown men and women, could enjoy a show based on Hasbro's My Little Pony. That disbelief laid the foundation and set the stage for Lauren Faust and her uniquely gifted team at DHX to prove us all wrong and show us that we could grow to love this program. Expecting tea parties and childish games of hide and seek, we were suddenly sucked in by an engaging and dark story with rich and memorable characters. And just when it started to get really good, just as your expectations began to break, to be continued. That cliffhanger was the bait, and we all took it. We had to know what happened next, and before we knew it, we were halfway through episode 20, and we knew we had joined the herd. Friendship is Magic makes my list not necessarily for its great action-adventure plot or its wonderful characters, but for what it has sparked inside me and inside millions of bronies across the world. Friendship. Number 9. Flight to the Finish. In my ICC about why I'm so obsessed with Scootaloo, iCard on screen for that video if you haven't seen it, you'll know that this episode holds a very special place in my heart. Scootaloo is my number 1 favorite pony in the show, and that is mostly due in part to this episode. Due to my physical limitations, I connected deeply with Scoots in this episode and could physically feel her heart break as Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon were harassing her for her inability to fly. However, not only could I relate to Scootaloo's pain, but I also aspired to her determination. She may have been hurting inside, but she refused to let that bad hand she had been dealt in life stop her, and that was so moving for me. Plot-wise, this episode isn't the greatest, but the reason this episode is on my list is due to the bond I now share with Scootaloo because of it. Number 8. Gauntlet of Fire. After years and years of Spike getting overshadowed by the main 6 and unappreciated by the show staff, it seemed as if Spike would forever be the go-to character whenever Hasbro needed to barf out a mediocre story to keep the season going. However, that all changed in Season 6 with Gauntlet of Fire. Never before has a Spike episode delivered this much enjoyment and epicness. Joanna Lewis and Christine Sonko finally gave the little guy a proper episode to star in. Princess Ember was also adorable and proved to be a great supporting character for Spike. Even Garble stepped up to the plate and delivered a handful of surprises. Previously, he had been just a one-off character that everyone expected wouldn't be anything more than a below-average antagonist for the episode Dragon Quest. But in Gauntlet of Fire, not only did he bring the heat, but he brought the laughs as well. With a great action-adventure plot, a fantastic setting, and super lovable characters, Gauntlet of Fire easily makes my top 10 favorite episodes list. Number 7. Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep? While Luna Eclipse was a fantastic episode, don't get me wrong, I think that if you want to see the best episode that primarily features Luna, look no further than the Season 5 mid-season finale, Do Princesses Dream of Magic Sheep. Never before has a non-season premiere or finale delivered this much insanity and emotion. Yeah, maybe Nightmare on Elm Street did this whole kind of thing first, but in my opinion, MLP did it better. The Tantibus was an intimidating and fearsome creature that really was a nightmare incarnate, in both aesthetic design and plot. The fan service littered throughout the dream sequence was also such a treat and really was the cherry on top. However, the best aspect of this episode for me was the root of the Tantibus, Luna's guilt. I was blown away during my first viewing that this show was really tackling self-inflicted pain as a subject matter, even if it was purely emotional pain and not the physical kind that those afflicted with depression might suffer from. This was a truly heavy subject matter and one I did not see coming, nor did I expect to be handled so beautifully. To Princess's Dream of Magic Sheep is one of those deep episodes that really pulls the emotion and discussion out of you, and it's one of my favorites because of it. Number 6. Pinkie Pride. Anyone who's watched my channel for long enough knows that Pinkie Pie is my absolute least favorite main 6. In my opinion, nearly every episode that focuses on her is just boring, juvenile, and can be downright irritating. So when it was announced that Pinkie Pie was going to be featured in an episode with the comedy polka musician Weird Al Yankovic guest starring, I cringed. I disliked Weird Al just as much, if not more so, than Pinkie Pie, and thought only a 10-year-old or someone with a mental age equivalent could find his music to be funny. Every sign was pointing to this episode potentially being one of my most hated, but when it aired, I was utterly knocked off my feet. Andrea Lemon's Pinkie Pie and Weird Al's cheese sandwich energized each other, and it was like a match made in heaven, with both of the characters bringing out the best in each other. Channing Kent and Weird Al also brought their A-game to the music department, and Daniel Ingram's signature quality was a huge factor in making it all come together just right. The animation on certain scenes was just breathtaking, and the plot actually made me feel something positive for both Pinkie Pie and Cheese Sandwich. Among the cold wasteland of Pinkie episodes, this one stands out as a diamond. Number 5. A Hearse Warming Tale. If you asked me to name an episode that had some of the best music in the show, I'd confidently say that our Hearse Warming Tale was one of my top picks. Unlike most other episodes with great music, this one really sends you on a roller coaster of emotions. Say Goodbye to the Holiday is chilling, Seeds of the Past is touching, Pinkie's Present is pure 100% uncut fun, and Luna's Future is intense and powerful. It would have been so easy to just take the classic story of A Christmas Carol, swap out some characters for the MLP characters, and call it a day. But Mike Vogel refused to tread that same old tired ground and instead gave us many unique and fresh twists to the timeless tale. Of course, many of these twists were probably just to censor the already dark and grim story elements of the original, but in my opinion, they were still super entertaining to watch, and not only did Mike Vogel do the original story justice, but he made it blend seamlessly into the universe of MLP. Every holiday season from now on, I'll certainly make it a note to watch this new classic. Number 4. The Perfect Pair. Wow. Just wow. It doesn't get much more emotional than this. Even though Lauren Faust's involvement with the show was long past when this episode aired, this really felt like a touching send-off to her given how it was entirely about one of her visions for the show, the fate of Applejack's parents. They never officially say that they were killed or that they are dead, likely due to the TV Y7 rating restrictions, but they come as damn close as they can to implying it without actually saying it directly. The Romeo and Juliet love story of Bright Mac and Pear Butter was also an incredible tearjerker. Guest star and fellow Brony William Shatner also gives an amazing performance as Grand Pear here, so much so that I didn't even recognize his voice until I found out he starred in this episode later. Most other guest stars in the show fall into pitfalls of having their voice eclipse their character, so all you can do is envision the voice actor themselves. This even happened to Weird Al and Pinkie Pride. Not here for Mr. Shatner though. This is by far the saddest episode in show history, and I will gladly cry through it over and over and over again. Number 3. To Where and Back Again. This season 6 finale was like Alice going down the rabbit hole into a bizarro alternate reality that was made just for me. The mystery about what had happened to the main 6 and the royal family kept me glued to the screen for the entire first part. When most of the major reform villains, minus Sunset Shimmer of course, came together to be the good guys and go up against my favorite villain in MLP, it was like Josh Haber and Mike Vogel had reached into my dreams and plucked a story right from my head. The tension in this episode was so thick you could cut it with a knife, and it had me on the edge of my seat throughout the entire thing. Seeing Queen Chrysalis again just made me so damn happy, and after her short-lived appearance in the Season 5 finale, it was fantastic to see her back, this time being creepier than she's ever been. While I wasn't too big on the whole changeling redesign, I still absolutely love this episode, and I'm glad the writers didn't reform Chrysalis so she could return again to terrorize Equestria. Hands down, this is one of the best season finales in MLP. Number 2. Crusaders of the Lost Mark. I can only imagine how I would have reacted to this episode had the ending not been absolutely spoiled for me by bronies unable to contain their excitement. But I don't blame them. This was an absolute masterpiece of an episode. Not only did the seemingly mediocre concept of helping Pipsqueak run for class president turn into something epic and fun due to the musical number, but seeing my headcanons about Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon confirmed through another musical number was incredible. Really, all the music in this episode would easily make a compilation of Daniel Ingram's greatest hits. Of course, we can't talk about this episode without marveling about that ending. The ending that Bronies have been waiting 5 years for. How fitting that this episode aired on the exact 5th anniversary for MLP, October 10th, 2015. I still can't watch the CMC achieving their cutie marks without welling up with tears. To hear Applejack tell Applebloom that mom and dad would be proud of her, to see Rarity watch her sister growing into a young woman of her own, and especially to see Scootaloo, the pony I've always been the #1 champion for, congratulated by Rainbow Dash, hit me so hard in the feels. I actually had a long, hard think when reworking this script to include later seasons about which of my last 2 episodes on this list should be number 2 and number 1, respectively. Initially, I had Crusaders of the Lost Mark at number 1, but then I started rethinking my stance. Crusaders of the Lost Mark is great, but when I think of which episode is going to stand the test of time forever, there's only one that comes to mind. Before we get to that episode, though, let's look at some honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1, A Royal Problem. This is one of the only Buy It rated episodes that didn't make it into my top 10 favorites. Given how Celestia and Luna have basically been glorified background ponies for about 98% of the show's history, given how they barely do anything on screen at all, it was so amazing to finally get an episode centered around them, and especially one that was so epic. We even finally got to see what Celestia's corrupted form would look like with the new character of Daybreaker. I still stand by my opinions that it is one of the best episodes of Season 7, but there were other episodes I liked more than this one, even ones with just a rewatch it rating, so I figured I'd put it here instead. Honorable mention number 2, Slice of Life. As a Brony, how could I not love the 100th episode? It's a love letter to fans with fandom Easter eggs and references out the wazoo, my favorite of which being Vinyl Scratch and Octavia living together. Kazumi Evans also did a great job voicing Octavia too. This episode, while mostly written by M.A. Larson, was really by fans, for fans, and it was nice for once to step away from the adventures of the main 6 to focus on the little background ponies the show had been glossing over for so long, and expand the wide and wonderful world of Equestria. Again, there were 10 other episodes better than this one, so I figured it wouldn't make it onto the list. Honorable mention number 3, Bats. This swan song from Meriwether Williams, a writer that I jokingly refer to as the female Dave Polsky, due to her catalog of episodes consisting of mostly complete failures in my eyes, was definitely her saving grace. This episode was incredibly dark, entertaining, and found a way to address a very sensitive subject matter, illegal immigration. Just the character of Flutterbat alone is reason enough to love this episode, but seeing such a serious political subject handled with such care and respect for both sides makes it a real treat. I know I sound like a broken record, but once again, there were more episodes that were better than this one, so I put it here instead of on the list proper. Honorable mention number 4, Twilights Kingdom. This episode reminded me a lot of the pilot, but with nearly every element cranked up to 11. I was shocked and thrilled to see the show staff dust off G1's main antagonist, T-Rex, and reboot him for this new generation. The plot was intense and dramatic, and T-Rex was the most menacing villain the show had ever seen. The writers did a fantastic job of making him seem unstoppable. The betrayal of Discord was also a great answer to some of the concerns that fans had about the rampant reformation of villains, and served to teach a great lesson as well. Of course, the biggest highlight of the episode was the final fight scene between Twilight and T-Rex, which had me screaming with excitement on my first viewing, and really got my adrenaline pumping. The only real reason it didn't make it onto the list is that I think To Wear Him Back Again did a lot of this stuff better. And finally, my number 1 favorite episode of all time is A Canterlot Wedding. I remember how big of a deal this episode was when it was first announced. I remember Hasbro pulling out all the stops with a day-long celebration hosted by Tori Spelling on the hub. I remember I held a screening at my local library for Bronies in the area to watch it live. I prepared for an experience, and an experience is what I got. This episode was just an absolute blast, and it still entertains me to this day, which is not something I can say for most of the other older episodes in this show's history. The music from this episode remains among some of my favorite pieces that Daniel Ingram has ever put out, and the new characters were such a breath of fresh air. The reveal that Twilight had a brother was a shock to the entire audience in attendance at my screening, and Princess Cadence was instantly a fan favorite not just for me, but for Bronies everywhere. Also, this episode gave us my favorite MLP villain of all time, Queen Chrysalis. I was already a huge fan of Succubi, and Chrysalis was pretty much a bugged succubus. Also, her duel with Celestia, while short-lived, was also incredibly shocking, and I remember hearing an audible gasp from the audience when we watched it live. The message of love wasn't also twisted or misconstrued as Disney might have done it. Instead, it showed the hardships, trials, and tribulations that Shining Armor and Cadence had to go through, and I thought that was wonderful. This episode is by far the most memorable for me, and even when I forget the plots of all these other episodes in my old age, I'll still remember A Canterlot Wedding as my favorite episode of all time. So there you have it. That's my list for my top 10 favorite episodes of all time. Let me know what your top 10 favorites are in the comments below, and as always, I am Critical Thought, and I will see you all in my next video. Never stop thinking critically.